All right.
Let me just share. Oh, here we go. All right. Do you have anything else you want to say, Mark?
No, I mean, Maureen Lamb has been, you're really throwing me off because every time I type an email to you, I'm calling you by your maiden name and I
Of
have,
course you are. Mark and I are good friends from college. So
so yeah, Maureen and I, worked together in the Department of Classics at the College of the Holy Cross, years ago for the now, sadly dearly departed Antoinette Mathy, who just passed away. Um, and Maureen, probably smartly, certainly more smartly than me, started high school teaching a lot earlier. And I only discovered that's what I should be doing much later. So she has so much experience in also um, sharing that experience and ideas with others, which you seem to be just looking at social media. You seem to be constantly doing that all year, including thankfully today for us. But I think you weren't you just doing something like this last week? Uh,
yeah,
we-
I went down to ISTE in San Antonio. I was getting an award as an AI luminary, which was super duper exciting. I got to meet a lot of people and talk about my experience with generative AI. And so it actually ties in so nicely to this presentation today, because a lot of people think about generative AI and Latin and they don't really make a connection. It's like, oh, ancient stuff, modern stuff, why? And I think as Mark knows, I actually got my start doing a summer job where I was coding websites. And so I am actually really proficient in computers and did a lot more with computers before I learned Latin. And so it's really interesting to kind of bring those things together because it's honestly, generative AI has a lot in common with coding, but coding also has a lot in common with languages. And I think that a lot of people talk about generative AI like, oh, it's going to make my life so much easier. It's going to save me so much time, which could be true. But I think that the real possibility and the real potential of AI is that it can create an opportunity for us to enhance our teaching. We can create more accessible and more equitable resources using generative AI. That's not to say generative AI is foolproof or anything. I just tend to have a very optimistic perspective on this. And so I like to call myself an AI enthusiast. I am well aware of some of the downfalls of AI, which we'll also discuss in this presentation. But I just want to make sure that you realize I'm going to have an optimistic point of view. So feel free to ask questions and to challenge and criticize what I'm saying, because I think it's really important to have those dialogues and those conversations. So this presentation is called Audaces Fortuna Juvat, Harnessing Generative AI in the Latin Classroom. Mark so graciously asked me to be here today because I couldn't give this presentation to Kane because my kids had a surprise day off, one of those things where it was a fluke thing. But it's actually wonderful. I get to do this online and hopefully share it widely, which is fantastic. If you want to follow along with this presentation or access this presentation at any time, feel free to use the QR code I put on this first page. I know sometimes for accessibility reasons, it's easier to follow along on your own screen. So if you want to do that and just listen to my voice, that's totally fine. A little bit about me. I've been teaching Latin for 18 years, which is amazing to me because it doesn't feel like that long. I also teach graduate school classes in Latin and language teaching pedagogy, as well as technology. I am currently the vice chair for the ACTFL special interest group on AI. I'm on the DEI committee for ACTFL. Um, and yeah, I'm involved in a lot with AI because I enjoy using it. And I think that the more opportunities we have to use it well and the more teachers know about it, and the more we can work on literacy, the better off we are all going to be. So let's get started here. Um, so what we're talking about for generative AI is really artificial intelligence that's creating new content. And I say create here, but what I'm really meaning is generating. And it's not reading per se. It's kind of hunting and pecking words a little bit. It's a little different than you might think. It's not a machine that's reading necessarily. Large language models act a little bit differently. But what you have to know basically is that this workshop's going to talk about how we can embrace generative AI tools in our teaching. And so we can simplify text, think about visuals, and just think of different ways we can engage students. and a quick overview. So we're going to look at some hands-on strategies. You are going to choose your own adventure with prompting if you wish. We're also going to look at AI in action. And so let's get started. This should be fun, I hope. All right. So, why is this important, especially with language learning? I think that the more that we can create a multimodal experience in the language classroom, the better off students will be because they are going to more easily acquire a language. Neuroscience backs this up, the latest research backs this up. And this is something that I talk about a lot in my course, Latin Teaching for Acquisition, because really, as Latin teachers, we do have to think about if our students are acquiring a language. I remember when I was in high school, I learned all the charts. I could translate everything. I could do every chart. And guess what? I couldn't read Latin. I came to college and I even got a 5 in the AP. Like I knew right stuff. I was a grammar person. And then I came to college and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot read Latin." It would take me hours and hours and hours to translate my homework because I could not read. And so it took years of teaching. And also learning to speak Latin, which was such an interesting and transformative experience for me to get me to actually get to a place where I am comfortable sitting down and reading Latin. That doesn't mean all Latin. There's some that's really fun to read, like Catullus is like reading an old friend, or Cicero, or ones that I really like. But then I can pick up some text and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on in this because I am not aware. And so just getting the tools I need to be successful is important. And so I'm trying to do that for my students as well. And generative AI can help me to enhance my lessons and make them more manageable for my students and make them more multimodal. Add those images, add those tasks, add those things to make the text come alive for students. And so some of the things it can do is text generation. I don't do this as much because I actually really like to write Latin because it's like nerdy good fun for me. But what I do now is I take the Latin I've written and I put it into generative AI and I say, "Hey, where are all the errors in here?" Because I'm human. I don't know anyone who writes Latin who writes it perfectly every time. I don't write English perfectly every time. And that's my first language. So it's really interesting. It can really help with that. It can do image generation. Now, my caveat here is there are levels of image generation. There's really good ones and there's some not really good ones. I had a particularly fun one this year where I was trying to have someone visit a bathhouse and it looked like there was someone getting a massage and then another human was coming out of its back. It was very strange. Sometimes the AI can have some strange hallucinations. It's like, what's going on in this picture? Of course, I used it on the assessment because the students found it hilarious. But it's it's really important to be precise with what you're doing for a prompt with AI. Because if you're imprecise, which I clearly was on this prompt, you might get some very strange responses. There it has come a long way since even this school year. Over the summer, Gemini has been a big blow up. Canva has a Dolly extension now, which you can use. Of course, you have limited credits, but Dolly is probably the gold standard right now for image generation and AI. And Bing Image Creator is still free, which is a pretty good one as well. Video generation. Oh my gosh, Google Vids is so cool. At that same conference I was talking about, ISTE, I was seeing how Google Vids can create little tiny videos. And as Latin teachers, I often use those Pixar videos and have students think about the vocabulary that might be from Latin. I like using the one with the sandpiper and La Luna with the moon and all sorts of things like that. But now you can create your own videos. And I did do kind of like a guinea pig version of this with one of my classes where I created a werewolf to illustrate the story of the werewolf in the graveyard. And that was pretty cool. And it actually came out pretty well. The werewolf looked a little strange, but it's a werewolf. It's supposed to look a little strange. But Google Vids is really cool, and especially the paid version is amazing. So video generation is coming a long way, and it's something, again, multimodal support for Latin learning. One of the biggest things that generative AI does really well is differentiation, whether that is students having choice of what they're doing in the language, or whether that is creating things like tiered readings. It's amazing and it's really helpful. It also can help create notes. So if you want to say, hey, I'd like a, you know, what is the background information students need to know about this passage? Give me a Latin to English vocabulary list for this passage that might be helpful to students, and maybe you give what textbooks, do they already know what words are the students already have acquired, because that's really helpful too, to gloss the words you need to and not the words you don't need to. There's just a lot you can do here. Assessment generation is something I've been doing with AI stuff for a really long time now. I use Formative, I use Conquer. I was a beta tester for Conquer, so it has had Latin for a very long time. And so that's really fun. Conquer is Conker. In fact, I've been name dropping a lot of AI tools. I think what I'll do after this presentation, if you don't mind, Mark, I'll make a list and share it with you to share out. Hopefully that will be helpful,
I think we'd
because I
all
don't want to
appreciate
just
that.
like, I don't want to name drop and then like not give you a link. So I'll do that after this. Finally, study guide generation. I've been working with Quizlet since 2015, and their study guide is a complete game changer. I am so impressed with what they've done. And guess what? I've been a beta tester for everything, so Latin is alive and well with Quizlet. So if you go into Quizlet and you add any text, it will not only create flashcards from that text, it will create a fully fledged study guide for you, as well as like a short review guide. And then you can immediately, I think it's 90 seconds to playing games, to doing review with flashcards. It's pretty amazing. And I know that some states were having trouble with Quizlet because students couldn't sign in, but now they have this wonderful thing for students called Student Pass, where they can use it for free for 90 minutes without signing in. So that's another really cool AI option. Something I've come up with is let me back up a second. When AI was first came out, I was so excited about AI, and more than anything, I wanted to make it work, but I was struggling to figure out what exactly I needed to put into a prompt to get a good outcome. And so I'm going to share it with you so you don't have to struggle, because this is literally what I come up with. I have this printed out by my desk. I am sharing a copy of this at the end of the presentation. If you want, I can even email you a copy. I do a clear prompting protocol. And so the first sentence is just clarity. What is it that I want, with as much detail as possible? Layout. Please tell me what layout you want this prompt in. Examples. What are some examples of what exactly I want? Aim. What outcomes do I want from this? And relevance. Who is this for? Is this for a Latin 1 class? Is this for a class that has learners who need additional support? Is this a class that has just finished chapter 4 of Subarani Book 1? Anything I can give to make it more relevant is super helpful. So I'm going to show you some prompts using this. And I also want to add that prompting is so very useful, and something that both teachers and students are really going to have to know how to do well in the future. It was really interesting. I was reading an article that ChatGPT put out, OpenAI, and it said that the average prompt was only 7 words long. How are you supposed to get a really good outcome if you're only adding 7 words? The most effective prompts were at least 21 words, and really more in the neighborhood of 50 words. Nowadays, my prompts are like 50 plus words because I do this clear prompting protocol, which means that I'm not going to go back and forth with AI over and over again to get what I want, because I already put it in there. And so it's a much quicker and easier process for me as someone who's using this tool. And this is something I've shared with my colleagues. This is something I share with my students, because frankly, when I first started talking to my students about AI, they're like, "Oh, it's the new Google." And I said, "Oh no, 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 that's not how this works. And you can't what you're not using it to look up stuff, because frankly, it has a lot of problems with bias and a lot of problems with hallucinations. And unless you're giving it really good prompts, I'm going to get really not good answers sometimes." And so it's really important to teach students about the power of prompting as well. So that's something I've been working on a lot. This has been really, really helpful. I literally have a copy of this by my desk when I'm working. I use AI every day, usually Claude or ChatGPT, but really every day doing something with AI. Whether that's for my personal life, like, oh gosh, I can't figure out what I want to eat for dinner, or, oh, I'm lesson planning. Let's do this lesson and have it give me ideas for this. Here's a lesson I want to refresh, or something like that. But we're going to see these in action in a few minutes. And so some of the goals to think about when we're thinking about AI is how can we enhance what we're doing? How can we make it better somehow? Exploration. What possibilities are there? Like, what can I do with what I've done all the time, but do it kind of differently? What can I do to make this interesting? Also entertainment. We are not entertainers like as teachers, but sometimes it's fun to entertain the students. That's not always our goal, but you know, it can make things fun. Like gamified learning really hooks students, especially Gen Alpha. Anyone out there who's starting to teach these Gen Alpha freshmen knows a little game goes a long way. If you stop and play a game for 5 minutes, they're going to be that much more hooked and that much more into what you're doing because they've had that brain break for them. And also they're doing something they enjoy doing. And finally, I feel like generative AI can be empowering. I think that you can do a lot of different things that we couldn't do before. I used to spend hours and hours of my time doing vocab lists, doing tiered readings. And now I can put a really good prompt in there and get the tiered readings I'm looking for, or nearly so, where I only have to edit it a little bit. It's really, really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to go through a bunch of ways that I use AI. These are not exclusive. These are not like exhaustive either. So there's lots of different ways you can use AI, but this is just some of the ways I do it. First, using ChatGPT for Latin prose generation. Like I said, I love writing Latin. I find it really fun and I like making up stories for my students. And there are definitely times when I'm like, you know what? I can let ChatGPT help me out with this. And so here's an example of a prompt I might use. So generate a simplified Latin prose passages for Latin 2 students, practicing perfect tense verbs, create 500 word narratives about Roman daily life using controlled vocabulary and familiar sentence structures. So that would be all in one prompt. So it's going to include perfect tense verbs. It's going to be about Roman daily life. I like to anchor what I'm doing in the classroom in Roman culture because a lot of my students don't take Latin because they're like, I want all the grammar all the time. They want to take Latin because they are interested in Roman history and culture. That is their hook. They read Percy Jackson and now they want to take Latin. And so I want them to continue to be hooked on Latin with the cultural context. And so anything I'm doing, even if I'm teaching new grammar, if I'm teaching new vocabulary, I'm going to anchor that as much as possible in the cultural context. And since I've started doing that, I've seen a huge difference in student engagement, in student acquisition of vocabulary. It's gone through the roof. I have students at the end of Latin 1 easily knowing and acquiring 250 plus words, which is amazing. And when I used to have them, memorize vocabulary lists, it was never like that. And so it's really, really cool. So I just want to explain why I'm doing that. And so I wanted some stories about market shopping, maybe attending school, family activities, again, with those perfect tense examples embedded. And those design passages too, supporting comprehensible input methodology. And so that means I am sheltering vocabulary, not grammar. They can see gerundives. Ooh, very early. They can see purpose clauses. And guess what? They most of the time figure it out. It's kind of amazing. Using comprehensible input, I can use more advanced grammar at a very low level, and they will start to pick it up. And it is very cool as long as they're understanding all of the vocabulary and all the context. Um, and so this also is important. Accommodate mixed reading abilities in second year classes studying Roman social customs. So I want to make sure that, okay, maybe I have some students who have mixed reading abilities. And I also would probably follow up this prompt with and create a script because then I would speak the script so that I could go back and forth and give students the opportunity to listen while they read. I do that for almost every thing I do in the classroom. And you might say, why do you take all that time? It takes me 5 minutes at the end of school to just read through whatever passage my students are reading that night. I use Mote, which is just it's easy record. You click the space bar, you record your voice speaking the Latin, and it gives students such an advantage because as they're reading, they can go back, they can listen to your voice speaking the Latin, and they can read while listening. And it's really, really cool. Again, made a huge difference for my students. They love it. Not that my Latin pronunciation is perfect necessarily, but at least it gives them something to listen to and understand. Um,
They could
also,
always tell who my students were in Latin in Ohio because
Why?
they all pronounce it with a Boston accent.
That's really funny. Yeah, I think I'm the only teacher who translates Waldy as wicked. Um, it was wicked hot in the forum. Like, um, I'm not going to read through every prompt that I did because I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, and I know I'm talking a lot. But Dolly is something I've been using. Dolly is, again, the gold standard of um, image generation, but I don't want to pay for it because I like free stuff. So what I do is I do my hack where I go into Canva. Canva, free for K through 12 educators, amazing. Go in and get the Dolly app. So there's a little button that says apps if you scroll down on the left side. And so you can get all sorts of cool apps. I also love the app Translate. So you can go into any Spanish, French, whatever material, and it will translate it into Latin for you. It's so cool. So I've done that with a lot of chat mats because it's fun. Um, but yeah, Dolly's great. And so this is something I actually did was generating interior scenes for Latin 1 because I wanted students to be I wanted them to do a project where they were basically a real estate agent trying to sell a house in ancient Rome. And it was so fun because they had these amazing AI generated images, obviously based on houses in Pompeii. They were talking about the functions of the house and they were doing it in Latin, really simple Latin, but they were doing it and it was very cool and getting them to kind of even getting the feeling, I like tell my students, just get the feel for it in your mouth. If you just like, I know that speaking another language can be scary, but if you start doing it, that's great. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And so just getting them to do that. I do a lot with chat mats too to just kind of get them doing that. And so a lot of the things I prompt too are creating images for the chat mat. Yeah, Mark.
You've used this term twice now, chat mad.
Oh.
What is it?
Okay. So what it is I basically take a poster type deal. It's an, 8.5 by 11. But what it is I have different prompts in Latin and then different responses in Latin with usually picture prompts. So to help them understand the language better. I'm happy to share these. Um, I
Thank
have to share a bunch with people that ask for it on Facebook because I have a bunch. But I just haven't gotten around to sharing them all because they're in PDFs in different folders, but I have a bunch. It's just so easy to create something like this in Canva with Dolly or with Canva, even image generation. So I do things like a chat mat on um, what things do you like to do? And you talk about it in Latin. And I give prompts for things you could say, like mihi placet, mihi non placet, mawult, things like that. Just to kind of give them a little bit of ways to do it without it feeling like a lot of pressure. My favorite thing to do is what kind of pet do they want in Latin? And we don't just do cats and dogs. We do parrots and snakes and all these different pets. And we go through the animal noises. And then students have a big debate on whether they like cats or dogs better in Latin. And they talk about the qualities of the cats and dogs. It's very, very fun. And it's all based on this chat mat. And then we talk about fantastic creatures. If you could have a fantastic creature like a dragon or a unicorn, what would you have? Because all those are in Latin too. And so it makes it really fun for the students and really engaging. And has them saying things like, I like, I don't like, I prefer, right away, which is very cool. So there's a lot of different things you could do. I was also using Dolly to create illustrations for the Aeneid, which it had mixed results. Some of them were really cool. I had some really cool underworld things that I did when I was reading book 6 with the students. And then some of them were just Aeneas did not look so hot. Yeah, it was not so good. And so, or he looked like I don't know, Themistocles or Leonidas. And it's like, oh no, we don't want that. No, thank you. We're not going to be watching the 300 right now. Let's put some clothes on that guy. And so it just mixed results on that. But yes, image generation is amazing, and you can find a lot of really cool free tools for this. Quizzes. Quiz creators, so fun. Quizlet is fantastic for this. You can export things through this. I use Formative. I pay for a Formative account because it is that good. Formative also tells me when students are copying and pasting. which is great because if I'm doing an online assessment, I want to know that. I can also comment. So if they're completely off base or doing something, I don't have to go over and talk to them. I can comment, and that keeps distractions at bay, which is great. But formative can be, you can create a quiz completely from AI, which is fantastic, in Latin too, which is really cool. And like I said, I've used Conquer, Conker, for creating quizzes in Latin. Again, I was a beta tester, so they do have Latin, which is very exciting. So Quizlet, Formative, Conquer, there's a lot of things out there. I know some people have had a lot of good luck using Magic School or Diffit for this as well. Again, I have to make a list of all the things we use. Um, but it's really interesting because you can also use things like Notebook LM. And this is something I do. I have a particular test format that I like to use. I cycle through 3 different test types. And so I will take that test format that I used, and then I will say, please rewrite this test to be for Subarani Book 1, Chapter 4. And it will rewrite it for me. It is so cool. Notebook LM is amazing, and it's just been opened up for students too, so they can use it. What you do is you add your own sources, and it's kind of like your own little closed GPT because it is taking information from your sources, which is pretty cool. So I might create when I was doing something for Subarani Book 1, Chapter 4, I would create my own assessment story. I would write it in Latin, and then that would be what the test would be based on. And I would use same question types as earlier tests. And that's why it was so easy and quick. And then if you wanted it, you could say, hey, and by the way, do 10 different versions of this. So every kid has a different version of the test. It's so cool. You could just do that. It's awesome. Not that I do it very often, but I do like to have 3 versions of every assessment because if a student is missing, I want them to be able to take it, but I also want to give students an opportunity to retake it if they need to, because it's all about skills. And if they want to improve their skills, that's fine by me. So it helps me do that quickly and easy instead of spending hours and hours making 3 versions of every test, which I have been doing since about 2015. So saving time and making it better. Creating tiered passages. Again, this is something I do all the time because it is so incredibly helpful, especially with students in that Latin 3 intermediate zone where they're just getting exposure to these more lengthy, authentic Latin texts. It can be a very challenging thing to help students transition if you're using a textbook or if you're using novellas to something that's more of a lengthy, authentic Latin passage. And so I find that tiered readings are the best way to do this. It really helps kind of scale up students and get them ready for that reading and gets them using really familiar things and then moving to less familiar things through the tiers. And so this is something I use all the time and something that I find incredibly helpful. Developing comprehension questions. You can use exactly what I was talking about before, Quizlet, Conquer. You can even use ChatGPT. Something I like to do as well is if I have question types that I really want to use, let's say I'm an AP teacher and I wanted to use question types for AP, I could put in the types of questions I wanted to use. And I would do that in a closed system like Notebook LM, where I'd use it as a different source for different things. So that would be really, really helpful. Um, but yeah, I think you can ask ChatGPT or any of these AI tools to do a lot and to help you come up with more creative questions and like wide ranging questions too. Again, not creative, generative, but it can help be your iterative brainstorming tool to come up with what you want to come up with. That's what's really cool about it. And again, visual representations. Like I said, I was doing this with the Aeneid. I think it can be really cool too to create samples of what you want students to do. And I honestly think this is such a game changer for a lot of students who might not be as confident in their artwork because when they're doing projects, they can use things like AI. I even had students using Canva Video Studio because they could add captions in Latin, which was so cool. And they also were able to use effects. They did some special effects in their videos and they were using AI to do the whole thing. It was really, really cool. And it let them do a great product and they didn't have to pay a lot of money for it. They could do it for free, which was really, really cool. And they were able to create these amazing things. Another thing I do all the time with my students is have them do cartoons to represent the text. So let's say I'll give them 6 pieces of text from whatever we're doing, and then they will have to come up with the images. And they can use AI for that, but they can't use in Canva they can't write in the Latin. So what they have to do is figure out the Latin and then generate the image using what they have figured out, which is really cool. And then I also have them label it in Latin, which is super easy to do. I have a couple templates if anybody wants them. It's really, really helpful, and it's something that my students really appreciate, and I just go in and use Canva has a lot of templates, but it just depends on what you wanna do with students. Again, really, really helpful. Okay. So, I wanna talk about the elephant in the room because I know there's been a lot of conversations around ethical considerations and best practices with AI. It's it's what's going on. I mean, we need to talk about this because AI and human beings are doing different work. Human beings are, by nature, our superpowers are creativity. That's not what AI is doing. AI is generating things based on what we're prompting it to do. And so it's really important as human beings using our superpower to make sure we have really good prompts to create an iterative experience with AI. We want to use it as a brainstorming tool. It should not be cognitive offloading and doing the thinking for us. That's not going to actually help us. What it will do, though, is it can help enhance our teaching. It can help us to do a better job. And some of the things to consider thinking about academic dishonesty and academic honesty. If you're using AI, tell your students, be like, I used AI for this, and this is why it was okay. This is why what I'm doing is actually using it as a brainstorming tool and not just doing my work for me necessarily. And so it's really important to talk about why and when you're using it and modeling that for students. It's also really important to have open conversations with students about when they can and cannot use generative AI. I think that sometimes they take that ambiguity and they run with it and think, "Oh, I can just use AI for this." Instead of thinking like, "Hmm, maybe my teacher wants to hear my voice. Maybe my teacher wants me to say my opinion." And I tell it to my students like this. If if I wanted to take a test, that'd be great. I'd do fine. Whatever. If I wanted to use generative AI for this, great. But what skills have I shown? What have I shown? You're not practicing your skills. You're not gonna get effective feedback on what you can actually do, and therefore, when you go to try to do something that requires a skill, you're not going to have the tools in your toolbox you need in order to be successful. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but my students seem to get that, and that's really cool, when I explain it to them that way. You need to develop these skills and have these tools in order to succeed, and if you don't kind of go through the cognitive process of problem solving and creativity and analysis and synthesis, then that's going to be an issue because you need to know how to do those things. Something I really like, and it is also an ethical consideration, is that you can create really a lot of inclusive features. Like I was talking about quick recordings, those recordings from Moat, by the way, there's AI transcripts you can make of those, which is amazing. Um, you can do all sorts of assisted things. The images themselves, creating a more multimodal experience for your students is actually going to help with inclusivity as well. Um, I think it's really important too, when you're assigning student work, make sure you're providing really clear rubrics and guidelines. Again, when they can use AI, when they can't use AI, why. I know it sounds silly, but telling them why they can and can't do things, they might not agree with you, but it's important that they know your why. And so, as much as possible, just letting them know what that might be. And finally, I know I've said this before, but it is an iteration tool. It is a brainstorming tool. It should not be for cognitive offloading. Again, can it save you time? Yeah. Can it make things easier? Sure. What should it actually be doing though? It should actually be enhancing your teaching. Tool like this can make what you're doing even better. It can make it that much more engaging. It can make it much more interesting. And so take advantage of that time saved to make things better. One more thing I want to say that I didn't actually bring up in this is AI can be incredibly biased. So it's really important when you're creating prompts to make sure you are taking into account that bias. I can give you a quick example. I work in an all-girls school, a very small all-girls school, and I was putting in something like, show me a picture of a boss. And it showed me an old white gentleman. And that is just one instance of, not just one, like multiple ones. And so it was really interesting that when I went into, I won't say what image generator it was, but the obvious bias was this is what it is, what this is what a boss looks like. And it's just really interesting and something you have to take into consideration when you're creating a prompt. Like that was a terrible prompt though. So that was on me. That was less than 7 words. That was a terrible prompt. If I had made 30 to 40 words about what kind of boss I'm looking for, I'm sure it would have come up with a better result. So sometimes AI bias can be bad prompting, if that makes sense, but also just know it's in there. And so the more we can have effective prompting, the more we're going to avoid that bias and hallucinations for that matter. Like the guy in the massage parlor with the guy coming out of his back. So you can avoid that by having a really good prompt. Couple of conclusions. Hopefully, this is going to give you some tools you can use to innovate in your Latin classroom. And if you have questions about any of them, I'm going to have some time at the end for questions, but also feel free to email me. I'm going to give all my contact information. So just feel free to reach out. There's a lot of things that you can do with AI, but please center the creativity and the humanity of your students. I think it's really, really important. I teach an all-girls school, so I think it's especially important for me to really emphasize to my students that they cannot let something like AI silence them. It's so important that they believe in the power of their own voice and their own creativity, and they shouldn't let things speak for them because it's easy to hide behind. And so we can't let people hide behind generative AI. Again, beware of bias, hallucinations, and cognitive offloading. And rely on each other. Together, we can help each other. If we are coming up with something and something like really awesome is going on, let's chat about it. If something really bad is going on with AI, let's chat about it because I think it's really important that we keep talking about it. We shouldn't be in a silo about this. Generative AI is the future, whether we like it or not. And so the more we can have conversations about it and not be afraid of it, I think the better off we're going to be. Final thoughts. Again, AI is not going anywhere. It's going to be a part of the workforce and schools going forward. There's no stopping it. It is inevitable. And AI literacy is already an expectation in colleges. This is something that students are expected to be able to do. And if used well, AI can be an amazing tool for accessibility and inclusivity in Latin. That's something that's really important to consider. So we can't stick our heads in the sand and pretend this is something that's going to go away. We can't ban it in schools because kids are just going to walk down the street to Starbucks and use their Wi-Fi to get on AI. So what we can do is teach ourselves how to use AI effectively and to keep centering the student experience and think about their own creativity as we think about using AI. Okay, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask questions, but I want to make sure that you have access to all these things. So if you want the clear prompt to take a look at the different prompt protocols and literally print it out for yourself because that's what I do. You can go to tidyurl.com/clear prompt. The QR code is just the code to this presentation, so feel free to reference it. I'm going to come up with a list of resources. I'll probably put it on the Facebook group. So some people were saying that in some of the Latin teacher Facebook groups, they didn't feel like there was a safe space to talk about generative AI. So I created one. So generative AI for Latin teachers is a space where you can come with your questions, you can come with your hesitations, like just come and like let's have open dialogue and discussions. Let's not shut it down. Let's talk about this because I think the more we not be siloed, the more we can be in community with each other, the better off we're going to be here. Feel free to follow me on social media. I'm at Latin Tech Tools on X. I'm Latin Tech Tools on Instagram, Latin Tech Tools on Blue Sky. You can see a pattern here. And on LinkedIn, I am Maureen Lamb. And I chose the name Latin Tech Tools back in 2010 before my students told me it was totally lame because it's Latin Tech Tools. Tool, get it? Haha. Yeah. So, but anyway, what are some questions you have? How can I be helpful?
Well, I was really interested in your prompts because I mean that's just a fantastic concept trying to be as clear as possible.
Yeah.
But I noticed in some of the early ones that you were actually saying generate something, but you didn't say where the vocabulary comes from.
Oh, great point. So if I were to say generate something and I don't have a vocabulary list, that means I would probably upload that. So one thing you can do is there's a little plus button on most generative AI prompts. And so I would add whatever text I'm doing, or
Okay.
I would put in the prompt. That's such a good question. I use Notebook LM for that. I use ChatGPT for that. I use Claude for that. Claude's really good for humanities and history. So if you're doing a course on that, it tends to be really, really good. But sometimes I just like using good old ChatGPT and adding it. And sometimes it's as little as going to the Latin library, copying and pasting it into a Word doc, and then just adding it. And that will give it the text and give it the context you need. Great point.
I don't have a question, but I really want to thank you for like a finite usable list of resources and tools. Like clearly, Canva, I still am behind the times. I consider it something like my high school students use when they want to whip up something. I have them do things for me so often.
Oh,
I've learned
yeah.
so much from the kids actually. But Conquer, I haven't even heard of, and it sounds like that's a go-to for you. So that's
It's
great.
a good one. My go-to honestly these days is just ChatGPT. I when I use the prompting protocol that I shared, ChatGPT works really, really well.
Yeah.
And I like the that you get like access to the paid version for a certain amount of time because the paid version's so good. It cuts you off after a while, but it's really good. I think I'm gonna have to purchase the paid version again. Not the $200 a month version. That's too
Whoa.
rich for my blood. But the $20 a month version I had for a year and it was really worth it. Things were lightning fast. It took your prompts and made it almost like it could know what you wanted a little better, which
I
sounds
admit
really weird, if you know
I
what I mean.
have I have the $20 paid one. I
Yeah,
somebody spoke at the beginning of our school year last year, and it was not he wasn't like shilling for the company, but he's
yeah,
like, if you're using it and you're using it well,
yeah,
these are draining things, like get the paid version. And I was like, no, okay. And
yeah.
it's noticeably it's worth it for me. It's really
It's yeah,
so I
it's
mean I use it for like family life things too. If my kid needs a logo of something to put on
oh
something,
yeah.
you're 25, please write 3 versions of this. It's not perfect, like you said, but I also really liked how you affirmed for me so much of like, again, I go to my kids for the students for a
Oh
lot of,
yeah.
and I love showing them what I'm doing. I love, I mean, making a huge deal out of like, well, look what with confidence ChatGPT is saying about this. You guys know that's not in book 4, that's in book 2. So really stressing to them like the honesty. I say, like I have a policy and like if you ever use it and you have any doubt, you got to ask first. But
Yeah.
then if you use it, you cite which one you used. I want to know your prompts because then if something goes wrong, we can figure out how. Um, and just them seeing how it can go. It's that fact that we're like all in process and learning. I love that idea of like we've got to dive in and do more. And I feel like pretty good about myself, but you're showing us so much more. I am feeling so bad for all the people who didn't notice that your name was in here on the cane thing because it was a huge reason why I was like, forget the the APSI. Like I'll work on plenty on my own. I want to see what Maureen Lamb has to say.
Thank you. I'm working on plenty of stuff too. So
Good. That's great. I love the generosity of Latin teachers. I feel like we really it's such a community. Other languages are jealous and they should be, but that's the price
yeah,
we pay.
absolutely. But the Plenty Letters are awesome too. Like the ghost stories are
Yeah.
so fun. My students made video trailers for each of the ghost stories, and it completely in Latin. They were so silly and fun. Oh my goodness. It
Really
was
good
just
job at that.
it was so accessible for them. I think that even the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, there's something so wonderfully raw and accessible about it. And it's simple. It's kind of like I don't know, it's evocative in its simplicity somehow.
Can
It's really
also
cool.
be a very darkly comic letter. Like I'm thinking of the line where he says, "Well, we knew he wasn't dead because well, he was snoring so loud."
Yes, there
Was
is.
the Meatai animus graviores.
That always makes an interesting conversation with the students.
Yeah.
And
Well,
the topics.
I almost ask you if in that real estate advertisement, you were including with ghost or without ghost.
No, I had a student do, they did the haunted house, and they made a sign because there's a meme online where there's a real estate that says not haunted, and so they did that in Latin outside the house. Like,
Oh,
you see a sign outside a house that says for sale, not haunted. I mean, what are you gonna think?
that's great.
One of the houses my wife and her parents looked at before we got this one, and I saw the pictures online. I feel like if I had gone to that house tour, that would have been my first question. Is this
It was
place haunted?
haunted.
Am I going to turn a corner and see those two girls from The Shining?
Oh,
Ugh.
I love this.
Yeah, my school is legitimately haunted according to the students. So it's a very old school. It was founded in 1843, and it was part of the Underground Railroad. So it has a very rich history, but it's very interesting. Um there's a lot of apparitions and sightings and such. So it made plenty come to life for them. They also love Perpetua. I know for the teacher choice readings, like Perpetua is heartbreaking. And they're like, oh, it's a rebellious teenager in some ways. Like, I'm gonna go against my parents and be a Christian. It's like really interesting. It's
Well,
they
I mean,
relate to that
the
well.
martyrdom in that narrative that came up in our lecture last night from James Patterson, um, uh, looking at martyrdom as a sort of countercultural
Yeah.
thing with people in North Africa, looking at Augustine too. And I had made the point that way. You have, yes, this Roman cultural thing that they're doing, but they're doing it, of course, in Roman cultural forms, the exemplary narrative. That tension you have with Jerome, is he a Ciceronian or a Christian? Uh, but ultimately trying to create this new Christian culture. I think James reminded us that one of the things that kept Augustine from finally converting was just that the Christian literature was just so bad. He, he couldn't do it. Um, any other questions for Maureen? Uh, I know I'm going to have to write a follow-up email because there was
Feel
just
free.
so many ideas
Gosh.
here, and I appreciate that. As someone who came in as kind of an AI skeptic, I think you really demonstrated clearly some useful ways. And I mean, also, I think it's admirable that unlike what I hear a lot online, you're realistic about what it can do and what we don't want it to do.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that too. But yeah, there's a lot for me to think about coming into this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a kind of a perfect storm of generative AI and Generation Alpha as the freshman this year, the ninth grade.
I'm
Um,
teaching ninth graders for the first time in a long time this year too. So
my best advice to you is short, targeted activities, and
yeah,
frequently changing activities. I
yeah,
know that's what my strategy is going to be. I have two Gen Alpha kids in my household, as in my 8 and 11-year-old, and honestly, like I tutor them a little bit in math and stuff, and honestly, the more you can do quick, targeted activities, the more you're gonna have their attention. That's when you throw in a game here and there. You have them talk to each other. There's just like they're not going to sit and absorb. They need to do and they need to interact. And more than any other generation that I have encountered in my teaching, they need those social emotional connections. They need
Mm.
to feel a sense of community before they are willing to fail. And so the more you can do that, the better off you're going to be. Generative AI or not, the more we can support these kids coming in, these iPad kids, that with these shorter activities, with this sense of belonging into the community, we're going to do better. And again, it's not a bad thing to change to this, but it's something that a lot of us won't be as used to. So it's really interesting to think about what that looks like. I've been fielding a lot of questions from teachers about Gen Alpha because I just wrote an article about Generation Alpha for the Language Educator, a magazine put out by Actful. And it's just really interesting reading the research about how they learn best because it is different. They
And
are going to be
some of it is going through COVID.
part
And
of it is, and I think that's why
learning to just be on their own. And if they succeeded, they did it by trying this, trying this, trying this, trying this.
right. And I think that's another reason why they're longing for that sense of community.
Mm,
They need those connections more than ever because I think they feel like they missed out and they missed out on really important parts of their social development.
mhm.
I know my daughter missed kindergarten and part of first grade. And so it was that's a really key time when you get to talk to people and know people and figure out how to interact with others. And so it's really interesting that they have these craving for this connection. It's really cool. And it's something that as teachers we can do. Sorry, very off topic, but something I'm thinking about a lot for this fall.
No, it's an important thing. And a lot of them are going to be artists because they turned inside during that time and they, found that they had an artistic self and enough time to stay with that artistic self, whether it's
You know,
dance, an instrument, whatever.
I have
it's
found that
funny.
with creativity. Honestly, the
Yeah.
more you harness their innate creative impulses, that's been really helpful.
It's funny you say that about art. For my upper level classes at Sturgis for several years, they were pretty evenly split between engineers and theater kids.
Mm.
That's
Well,
kind of
you have no
cool.
idea how many IAs on aqueducts I have gone over the. Although some of them are actually pretty good. This one girl who went to Northeastern wrote on thefts from aqueducts. That was really cool.
Cool.
I mean, the best thing I said to her is like, Bethany, you taught me something. That's the
Mm.
highest compliment I can give you. Um, but this year I had a lot more artists. Very
Mm.
few, and
Nice.
and really talented artists too. I had a student who I taught her for 3 years. She is largely mute, but she was an amazing artist, and I would follow how she's also very proudly Sicilian, and I would follow how like different Sicilian motifs, like the three legs on the flag, would kind of appear in her artwork. Um, and I think that was, and so those artists in the class, they had their own kind of little community in my classroom as
Mhm.
well,
That's
which I
really cool.
appreciated.
Well, they can be artists and engineers or
That's true.
musicians,
Yeah.
and they can do that too. But it's a really interesting time. And I think you could probably do 5 sessions, like one on one set that you were mentioning. Because you were saying you could use this or this or this or this. And you
I
could,
know. I feel like I need to do a tool thing for Latin teachers. I've done a lot of AI workshops, but I haven't done one that's completely tool specific. But maybe that's the next thing I propose. So
well, and not try to do all the tools, but like
pick
do
out 4 or 5. Yeah.
problem and show how if you use this tool, you would generate this kind of thing and another
Yeah.
tool, another one. People would be really interested. I'm sorry that this is not like 50 people in this workshop because it should be. This is really great.
Well, thank
Oh,
you. Thanks for coming out. And please feel free to get in touch. I am super happy to share all this stuff. So,
And do you feel comfortable if I share this with someone
oh
who's a
yeah.
beginning teacher, for instance?
Oh, please do. Yes.
Okay. They might actually contact you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Susan, is it Jack?
Oh, well, right now, yes, I'm thinking of Jack Tagani, yes. But
Oh,
Uh,
just going forward, because I hope to have another
I
speaker next year.
let me, since this is recorded, let me at least try to find a way to get you the file, so you
Oh,
can watch it. Um,
that's so kind of you.
well, I mean, it's one of the reasons that we try to have the Summer Institute is to, we have the folks like Fred or Shirley who are older and retired and just go because they like learning stuff, and that's largely kind of why I go. But then we have teachers, whether they're younger teachers like Jack or teachers like Maureen and I's age, who've been in it for a bit. But we want to get this material out there as much as we can. Um,
And the new ways of doing things. And
Yeah.
that's one of the problems of having people like myself as the program supervisor, because the actual classroom teacher may be doing these things or maybe not doing these things.
And
Oh,
I think
I
that,
I
But
should mention that I'm doing a keynote at Hopkins School in New
ooh,
Haven in November for ClassCon that's going to be focused on AI and Latin. So that might be helpful for folks too. Um,
you must publicize that.
yeah,
the other thing, Susan, I was thinking is that what Maureen just did for us tonight complements, I, in some ways, John's workshop yesterday, where I think John was looking at like really big picture stuff
Mhm.
in the externalities of the political situation right now.
Mm.
Whereas what Maureen has provided for us today, not to deny that those are there, but practical things that you can do as activities in the Latin classroom. And I think having both of those
Mm,
kind of toolkits together is going to be really helpful for this school year.
yeah, for especially for a first year or second year, even third year teacher, where they're just getting into their groove. That's
that's where we need to keep them because most of the teachers that leave the classroom do before year 5. So the more we can support them during those first 5 years, the better off we're going to be.
I think one thing I realized is it's just like burnout
Yeah,
yeah,
too. I mean, I kind of got over that in graduate school rather than doing the high school stuff, but um,
you're right.
figuring out that, like, I guess we might call it appropriate work-life balance, uh,
yeah.
which I
And,
suppose gets easier when you have children, Maureen.
And you have a choice.
totally. You have no choice. But
Yeah.
also our community. I think the more that Latin teachers can rely on each other in community. I know I got 3 or 5 because I was relying on amazing Latin teachers like Jackie Carlin and
Mm,
Jeannie Blasi and like other people who are just incredibly generous with their time and energy and sharing of resources. Jill Crooker. I'm like thinking about all the people who gave me stuff to help me. Sarah Torrance, like all these people like went out of their way to help me be a better teacher and help me from the goodness of their heart. And I think that there are some Facebook groups that where people are sharing stuff still, and it's just so helpful and it's so uplifting that we are in community with each other because it can feel so siloing, especially if you're the only Latin teacher like me. And so it's so nice to have our communities of sharing. It's really, really helpful.
Also for the IB stuff too, with just other IB Latin teachers,
Yeah.
because IB schools don't tend to be contiguous all the time.
Yeah,
Um, and so to have those resources, at least for the English speaking part of the world,
sure.
especially when you have a new curriculum, can be very helpful.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much. I'm going to sign off. This was really great.
Thanks so much for coming out
Oh,
tonight.
thank
Appreciate it.
you.
And if anyone watches it after, like, feel free to share. I'm fine with it.
That would be great.
Okay, yeah, we end up putting this up on the lecture series then.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, I'm happy
I think
to.
there's a lot of good stuff in here that's going to be helpful for folks.
Yeah,
Appreciate
no, happy to share.
um, so okay. No more questions. We'll thank Maureen for her time. This was just an incredibly rich presentation. Susan, we'll see you tomorrow in our classes, in our lecture. We've got Christopher Richards talking about Medusa. Are either of you taking that class with Christopher?
Oh, I am. I'm in there.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Oh,
Oh, so I popped in for about 20 minutes today, and I was about to pop out, and he says, "Let's look at this really bizarre reliquary." Um, and so it's a
Ooh.
reliquary in Germany, and the reliquary is King David, but the face is Medusa. That like
it's
they've like a Medusa they've reused on it, and
Oh,
it,
okay. I understand now.
it's
Weird.
it was fascinating, and I asked like, well, what I popped in because I was like I couldn't help myself. I was like, do you know what relic was in there? And the thought I guess was that it was just consecrated hosts, not necessarily, you know, a bone chip or something like that.
there was that little white thing that when he did
Yeah.
the zoom in on the lattice. It's like the time I was showing something it was the Sackler then at the Harvard Art Museums, and I was looking at the shape of the pot, and talking about that with the students. And then one of them said, "Wait, what's that inside? It looks like a piece of bone."
Oh my.
I was wondering what was that little white thing in there.
When I took we took some Sturgis students to Rome last February, the closest church to us in Hyannis is St. Francis Xavier. So I took them into the Jesuit church and I brought them over to this altar in the back. It's like, you know that church down by our school, St. Francis Xavier? That's his arm. The rest of him is in India, but his arm is right there. And I was like, yeah, guys, all the cool relics are here in Europe. Um, but
But
when I
that
asked,
class is, mainly it was the whole ancient world, starting with archaic and then
I
classical. So
when
this was
I
brand new for us.
so my friend David Wright, Maureen, you remember David?
Of course I remember David.
No.
Your brother, right?
I once told Sarah Iles Johnston that we weren't related, and she took one look at us because David still had hair at the time, and she's like,
Oh,
sure,
you
you're
have such
not
beautiful hair.
good.
Cut this out of the presentation, Mark.
Yes, you better cut this out.
So
Steve just wants to talk about
David
hair.
recommended Christopher to teach, and when I started corresponding with Christopher, he had been looking at these Medusa in these Ovid manuscripts, and my paleography professor in grad school was a big Ovid manuscripts guy, so that caught my attention right away. So when I had an opportunity for him to fill in for a speaker, I thought I want to hear more about this because I can't take your whole course, and I just manuscript stuff gets me right there. So I was lucky that my book was required manuscript work, although I didn't get to do all the traveling. Kara got to do all the traveling. So. All right. Well, we'll cut this part. Cut this part out. But I think it's going to be a great lecture tomorrow night. So hopefully we'll have a good turnout for that. So good night, everybody. Maureen, again, thank you so much.
I'm really going.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to go do bedtime, so.
yeah,
Maureen, I am going to reach out. I think it sounds
Please
like we
do.
actually have a lot in common. We're
Oh,
actually Facebook friends. I just double checked, but we both have boys. We
amazing.
both teach all girls schools in Connecticut. I'm like, oh,
Ooh, where do you teach?
I'm at Greenwich Academy. I actually teach mostly boys because we take in the Brunswick kids across the way.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's connect. That'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
I was Lindsay Sears's middle school counterpart until she left and I left. And then I
Oh,
became the upper school counterpart.
okie
Still
dokie.
trying to fight the good fight, but
Good
we'll
for you.
touch base. We'll touch base.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Thank
Awesome.
you so much for everything. It's one of my darlings.
Hello.
Oh,
That's the 12-year-old.
I
He's gotten too.
we had a
Thank you so much.
thank you, everybody. Have a good
care.
night.
Good night, everybody.
talk.